Hi, everyone. So, identity meltdown. What do I mean by this? Well, if you're aware that ascension is occurring, you probably understand that one of the things that's happening is that you're in the process of letting go of your 3D identity, right? You know, your sense of who you are, and you're shifting into a whole new higher frequency identity known as your 5D identity or your 5D self. But what does this really mean, and what does it entail? Maybe you can think of experiences and realizations you've been having lately that seem to fit this description of a shift in identity. Like maybe you've recently left a relationship that had been very important to you for some time, but somehow it no longer seemed to energetically fit who you were now becoming. Or perhaps you've left a career you had, for many years that somehow no longer excited you. Or you're becoming aware maybe that your group of friends now is quite different from what it was years back. All these types of situations are likely signs of your sense of your identity shifting, probably, hopefully, into a higher frequency that somehow suits you better at this point. So the shifting of identity can be kind of a slow, incremental process with shifts into higher frequency situations like this. Not all that different from what might have happened years back as you awakened more clearly to who you were and what was more beneficial or valuable for you. But perhaps lately, this process of shifting to a new version of yourself has sped up a bit. Larger pieces of your life and your old identity are falling away now. And maybe multiple aspects of them, too, all at once. And perhaps this has left you at times in a state of confusion and anxiety, disorientation, not quite sure who you are anymore, not certain where you're going, what you want out of life, or even what's important to you. Perhaps you're even questioning the spiritual path you've been on for a long while. You're not getting the sense of peace and certainty you used to get in the practices you did in the past. You find you just can't do them anymore. And you wonder about your beliefs about life and the world and yourself as a spiritual being that you maybe just adopted at one point because a certain teacher or teaching taught them to you, and now they seem kind of empty or meaningless. And if you're like a lot of people on a conscious spiritual path, you then maybe fall into a sense of guilt or self-judgment about this. Like you should be doing these practices. There's something wrong with you if you don't feel drawn to do them anymore. Well, as uncomfortable and maybe even frightening as this state of being may be, it's important to understand that these kinds of experiences tend to be part of your ascension process. Your old 3D sense of who you are is peeling off. And it can feel as if, you're kind of disappearing because there doesn't seem to be much to replace what's been left behind, at least at this point. And, this is part of what I've called the ascension void, a space of time in which what used to engage you is disappearing. And a great emptiness can appear in your life because nothing else seems to be showing up to take its place. Your life has become flat and kind of boring, and you don't recognize yourself anymore. Your old identity is basically gone, and you can even question your sense of value, your importance of simply being alive. So this is something a lot of people have experienced on and off in one way or another Since the Ascension process of shifting into the fourth dimension began back in 2012, as I say, it seems to be part of the Ascension process for most of us. But maybe you've had a huge hit of this all at once lately, and it's knocked you off your feet. You feel like you're totally in meltdown mode, and all you want to do is just go back to bed. Maybe there is something in your life that you have really wrapped your whole identity around that has suddenly either been yanked out from under you, or something awful has happened with it that has maybe revealed parts of yourself you really don't like and don't want to look at. Like, it could be a relationship you've somehow made so important to who you've thought yourself to be that has suddenly ended or greatly changed in some way. This could be with a romantic partner, or it could be a family member, maybe your child. And the change could feel like a total rejection of you somehow. Or maybe it's a huge loss due to death. This is happening to more and more people these days. And it feels like there's nothing much left of you if you're no longer relating to that person as you have been. A good part of your identity had to do with the fact that you were in relationship with that person in a particular and important way, and now it's gone. Or it might be that you have wrapped your identity around a certain job or career you've had for a long time. Somehow your whole sense of value has been based on how you've seen yourself to be performing in that work. You've been really good at it, maybe. People looked up to you. You felt important, maybe even spiritually developed because of how you've been able to perform this job. But now, for whatever reason, that whole connection between your work and your identity has been severed. Either you've lost the work, or you've given it up, or something has been revealed about you in the work that's very painful. And you realize that you're basing your sense of value and your very identity on it has somehow had not much reality to it. You wonder who you are now that that identity is either gone or has greatly shifted. And you find that what you've essentially been doing is basing your sense of identity on what you do in life rather than on who you simply are. And this kind of meltdown can also happen when you suddenly receive a physical diagnosis of some kind that means that you won't be able to do certain things that used to be an important part of your sense of value of yourself. A lot of different circumstances like this that totally change your life and your sense of who you are can do this to you. Anything you've been able to do or be in the past that you've based your sense of identity and value on and that is suddenly taken away from you can be extremely painful, because it's the disappearance of not only who you've thought yourself to be, but also your experience of who you are. Again, these types of experiences have always happened to people in the past, right? This isn't anything new, except that there is now a new element involved in these kinds of losses that wasn't necessarily present in past decades. And that's that ascension is happening now. And this complicates the process because our sense of identity is already being challenged by the fact that the frequency on the planet is rising very rapidly at this point. And everything we've thought ourselves to be is already being challenged like never before. All the characteristics we've developed that we have valued, all the important things we've achieved, how awake we've become, and all the challenges we've overcome. These have all felt really important to us and to our sense of identity. And of course, all these things we've experienced and accomplished have been important. We've grown and healed ourselves and evolved in important ways. This has all been part of the process of ascension up to this point while living in 3D and 4D so far. But the question now arises, as we move closer and closer toward 5D, do these things we've believed ourselves to be and things we've done really define who we are? Is the sum of all these things really who we are? If you've been on a serious spiritual path for any time, you'd maybe say, well, no, of course not. I know I'm something much more than all these things I've accomplished and experienced in my human life. My true spiritual essence is actually light or love. I'm a soul, not a body. I'm the I am presence. I'm a spark of God. I am source, or however else you might define the true essence of who you believe yourself to be. And perhaps there have been times in which you've experienced this and known it beyond a doubt. Maybe truly life-changing experiences of the greater reality of yourself have occurred and have really impacted your life. But if you're honest, maybe you'd admit that despite the deeper knowing of who you really are, you have nonetheless continued to attach your sense of identity to what we could call your personality self. You know, your physical body, your emotions, and your mind. You generally experience yourself as a person who maybe has a soul or a spirit or a higher self. Not that you are this luminous, multidimensional being who temporarily has a physical body and a human consciousness that operates in this material world. And perhaps because of this, when contemplating living in the fifth dimension, maybe you've imagined yourself to be someone who is still identified with all those aspects of yourself as a person, but just happier, more balanced maybe, and more spiritual somehow. Maybe more skilled in performing feats that people you consider more spiritual can do. You know, like astral traveling or miracle healing, channeling, traveling through portals to other places in the universe. You know, whatever your imagination might come up with. In other words, you're still a somebody with a similar sense of identity as a person, but just a better version of yourself. Well, if you're like most people involved in the ascension process, you're probably going to be realizing at some point that a lot more is involved in permanently shifting into fifth dimensional consciousness. You don't just become a better, clearer, and more spiritual version of yourself. Something else much more dramatic needs to happen. It's like totally stepping out of an identity suit as an entity known as a human being into realizing that, guess what? You really are light. You really are love. You really are just pure consciousness, pure being. Can you imagine, for instance, waking up in the morning with this experience, with immediately fully knowing and experiencing yourself as pure light, rather than groaning about the fact that you have to get up even though you don't feel like you've gotten enough sleep, or immediately beginning to think about what you have to do that day, or remembering the painful thing that happened yesterday that you have to resolve today? What would that be like? And what would it be like to walk around in your life, constantly experiencing yourself as a large and powerful field of luminous light, aware that your physical body, with its emotions and thoughts, is walking around with you, not as you, but actually within you. You're just this invisible, energetic presence that can kind of watch your body and your emotions and thoughts and what comes out of your mouth. There would be a real freedom with this, right? Now, it's true, if you were to experience yourself as this field of light, you would likely continue on in life, doing many of the same things you've always done before, having relationships, working, playing, eating, just hanging out. But it would be with an entirely different sense of who you are, right? You'd see emotions and thoughts are passing through you. They'd come and they'd go. But as this divine light, you'd know that there's really nothing to fear, nothing really worth getting upset about. Even if your body were to suddenly seize up in fear about something, you would also be there, quietly and calmly watching this happen. You'd have the profound trust of knowing that, like with all things, some solution would eventually appear, and your body and personality self would relax again, as it always has in the past. You'd know that all is really as it should be. And as this light being, you would have a sense of identity, but it would be totally fluid. Multiple identities would flow freely in and out of you as needed, as appropriate, depending on what you were doing. There would be none that you'd get stuck in or that you'd rely on for your sense of feeling valuable. You'd be experiencing yourself as the lighted space in which all identities appear and disappear in. See if you can feel into this experience for a moment as this field of light and awareness all around and within your body. Feel the peace that is present with this. The calm sense of wisdom. The depth of love that is there. You are actually quite large as this field of light. Can you sense this? How the true essence of who you are actually extends outside of your body. How your body is something that exists within you. You're inside your body too, but you also extend outside of it as divine light, as a loving presence. Now, maybe your sense of a new higher frequency 5D self might be somewhat different from this. This is just one type of experience you might have of yourself when living in 5D consciousness. One sense of a new identity, of who you will experience yourself to be. We're all unique. And if you don't quite relate to this description, you might want to take the time to feel into this question for yourself of what living in a new 5D identity might be like for you. Because it is becoming possible for us to do this now. Not shifting into it permanently yet, probably, but to kind of slip into it and get a brief experience of it, get a sense of how it feels. Whatever your experience is, it's probably something much more simple, much less demanding of energy for you to experience. It's an identity that feels totally natural to you, in which there's no need to censor yourself in any way, no more need to act in a way that doesn't feel comfortable. And there's no more sense that you have to keep improving yourself, healing yourself, or changing anything that's wrong with you. You're just as you're supposed to be, flowing, changing, growing and healing naturally, always evolving. You're still here to learn things and explore new ways of being, but there's no judgment about your needing to change yourself in order to be okay. So the reason I'm saying all this is so that when you begin to go through the true identity meltdown that probably everyone headed for 5D has to go through at some point, you won't freak out. You'll realize that there's nothing wrong with you when things in your life start to really fall apart, or when you realize that just about everything you've ever thought was true about yourself turns out not to be. You're simply shifting identities. You're stepping out of your old, very limited 3D identity and getting ready to begin experiencing your new and expansive 5D identity. It's a huge process. So there's nothing to judge yourself for when you find yourself spinning out of control into a sense of emptiness or fear or despair. Now, in the process, it can get really scary at times. There may be new fears you've never experienced before that suddenly show up. You may find yourself really asking, who am I? Not recognizing yourself at all. And the world and how it operates might begin to feel strange to you too. You might feel you no longer know how to relate to ordinary people out in the world anymore. You might feel like you're floating in an unknown space in which you don't really recognize yourself or your life anymore. But this will only happen for a while. You kind of get used to the unsettled feeling, the great unknown of all the changes occurring inside yourself. You begin to feel stronger, more in charge of yourself, no matter what's happening. You know that you can ride it through whatever it's going to take, and that it's just part of the process of shifting into a dimension that is so much higher than the one you've been living in, probably for thousands of years. It's a huge, momentous operation happening here, this thing we call Ascension. And the process of losing your identity is really unknowable until it begins happening. But when it does, you just somehow need to surrender to the process of meltdown, or what it might feel like a dissolution of who you are, and just keep flowing with it. You need to trust you are being guided into the higher frequency in the best way possible for you. Things are being pulled out from under you because they can't go with you. All things you've believed to be true about yourself that you're now finding out are not true need to be seen and then left behind without any regrets or judgments of yourself. It's just all part of the process. But while you're going through this death of your old identity, your old self, it's important to also pay attention to what else is happening. You're also in the process of birthing an entirely new self as well. And it may not be apparent yet as the clean-out process progresses. But if you can relax and trust the process, you will begin to see and experience what it is. So anyway, if any of what I've described here feels familiar to you, I hope this has been helpful. And that you get that you really don't need to be concerned about yourself. Do take care of yourself and get help if you feel you really need it for a while. But also remember, you're likely just going through a phase in your ascension process in which your old 3D identity is slipping away just as it needs to. So as always, I encourage you to just keep going and explore this strange, but actually very intriguing aspect of ascension, losing your sense of identity. An interesting phenomenon, right? And just watch to see what will happen next. What an adventure this is. And what an intrepid explorer and pioneer you are to have chosen this journey. Just think about this. And remember, you are not alone. There are more and more of us on this complex and fascinating journey every day. And we're all in this together, here to not only evolve into a higher version of ourselves, but also to raise the frequency of the entire planet. And after many thousands of years, our work really is almost complete. Much love to you.